Her termination letter tore in half in her shaking hands, the paper dissolving into the rain as she realized she had nowhere left to walk except forward. The cardboard box pressed against her chest felt heavier than grief, heavier than the words unprofessional and liability that had ended her career only minutes before. Before anything else happens, if you're watching Kind Soul Narratives and you believe in hope, compassion, and second chances, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like this are for hearts that still believe broken moments can turn into miracles. Maribel Cross walked along the shoulder of the highway under a pale gray daytime sky, the kind that never fully commits to rain but promises it anyway. Cars rushed past, spraying mist onto her scrubs, now wrinkled and stained with the memory of a job she no longer had. Inside the box were the remnants of a life she thought was stable, a cracked stethoscope, a faded ID badge, handwritten notes from patients she'd never thrown away. Her badge photo still showed her smiling, back when she believed competence was enough to protect you. Each step sent a sharp reminder through her ankle, an old injury she'd ignored for months because sick days were a luxury she couldn't afford. The pain kept time with her thoughts, each throb a reminder that she had stayed late one time too many, bent one rule too far, and paid the price. The hospital's decision replayed in her mind with ruthless clarity. She had overridden a protocol during a supply shortage, using an outdated piece of equipment to keep a trauma patient alive while waiting for clearance. The patient survived, but the paperwork didn't forgive her. Administrators called it reckless. She called it human. Now, walking home with the smell of antiseptic still clinging to her clothes, she felt the weight of every choice she'd made since nursing school, every night shift, every birthday missed. Her mother's voice echoed in memory, reminding her that care without caution can break you. Maribel had learned that lesson too late. The road curved through a stretch of forest where the sound of traffic softened, replaced by wind through wet leaves. She stopped briefly to catch her breath, leaning against the guardrail, eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. Being fired didn't just mean losing income, it meant losing identity. Nursing was the language she used to understand the world. Without it, everything felt foreign. She imagined the box slipping from her hands, its contents scattered across the asphalt, and wondered if that was what her life looked like now, useful things abandoned by the side of the road. A distant thudding sound began to rise above the hum of engines. At first, she thought it was just another truck, but the vibration deepened, rhythmic and heavy, sending ripples through the air. Birds burst from the trees as the sound grew louder, more insistent. Maribel turned, squinting against the wind, and saw the unmistakable shape of a helicopter cresting the tree-line. Then another followed, their dark silhouettes cutting through the low clouds. The traffic slowed, drivers pulling over as the helicopters descended toward the highway ahead. The rotors whipped the rain into a frenzy as the aircraft landed on the closed stretch of road, their presence surreal against the mundane backdrop of commuters and wet asphalt. Soldiers moved with urgency, securing the area as onlookers gathered behind barriers. Maribel's first instinct was to turn away, to shrink into invisibility. She was tired of uniforms and authority, tired of being judged. But as she stepped back, clutching her box, she noticed the chaos wasn't random. Medics rushed between vehicles, and one of the soldiers scanned the crowd with desperate focus. She felt it before she understood it, the pull of responsibility she'd tried to bury. Her heart pounded as memories surged forward, not of policy manuals but of hands she'd held in fear, of breaths counted in the dark. The soldier's gaze swept past her once, then again, lingering on the blue of her scrubs. A sharp gesture followed, urgent, unmistakable. She froze, torn between instinct and fear. She had been fired. She was no longer authorized. The rules that had just destroyed her life loomed large in her mind. As she hesitated, the box slipped slightly, revealing the stethoscope. The metal caught the light, a small glint of who she was. Something inside her broke open then, a quiet acceptance that some callings don't end because someone signs a paper. She stepped forward despite the pain in her ankle, despite the knot of dread in her stomach. The closer she got, the clearer the scene became: an overturned vehicle off the road, smoke curling from its hood, a figure trapped inside. The air smelled of fuel and rain. Maribel moved automatically, setting the box down with care, her hands steadying as if guided by muscle memory alone. She assessed from a distance, reading the scene like a language she'd never forgotten. The soldiers parted, urgency etched into their movements, and she felt the weight of eyes on her, some curious, some skeptical, some hopeful. She reminded herself to breathe, grounding herself in the present moment. This was daylight, real and raw, not a training simulation. Someone needed her now. She knelt despite the protest from her ankle, focusing on the injured person's breathing pattern, the subtle signs others missed. Time stretched and compressed all at once as she worked alongside unfamiliar faces, adapting, improvising, drawing on every lesson learned in overcrowded wards and underfunded nights. The fear of consequences faded, replaced by clarity. This was why she had chosen nursing. Not for approval, but for moments like this where compassion outweighed fear. When the patient was stabilized enough to be transferred, the intensity eased, replaced by a strange quiet. The helicopter's engines idled, and the rain softened to a drizzle. Maribel stood slowly, muscles trembling, aware again of her soaked scrubs and the box waiting by the guardrail. She expected dismissal, maybe even reprimand. Instead, she felt a shift in the air, a collective recognition of something unspoken. The soldiers moved with renewed respect, their urgency tempered by relief. As the helicopters lifted off again, the road slowly reopened, and the crowd dispersed. Maribel remained where she was, unsure what came next. She felt exposed, vulnerable, the reality of her firing returning like a chill. Yet beneath it was a warmth she hadn't felt all day, the quiet knowledge that she had mattered when it counted. The forest around her seemed brighter, the gray sky lifting just enough to let light through. She retrieved her box and began walking again, but her steps felt different now. The pain was still there, the uncertainty unchanged, yet something inside her had shifted. She thought of her mother, of every patient note she carried, of the line between rules and humanity she had walked so carefully and fallen from. Maybe this was not an ending, but a reckoning. Maybe being a nurse was not something a job could take away. If this story has touched your heart so far, please support Kind Soul Narratives by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support helps keep stories of resilience and compassion alive. As the highway faded behind her, Maribel reached a quiet stretch of sidewalk leading toward her neighborhood. Sunlight finally broke through the clouds, illuminating the wet pavement in soft gold. She paused, setting the box down once more, and allowed herself a single, deep breath. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time that day, it didn't feel empty. Before the final moment, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment about what this story made you feel. Maribel lifted the box again and continued walking, not as someone who had been fired, but as someone who had been called. Each step carried the weight of loss and the promise of purpose, a reminder that even when institutions turn their backs, compassion can still land like helicopters on an empty road, calling out for those brave enough to answer.